Hello, everybody, first of all.
Yeah.
Nice to see everyone. We're just chatting about how different talking about politics was when Katie was working at Network News versus what she's doing today. And I totally agree with you that what seems fair to me, Katie, is to tell the truth.
Yes, I
That's what
agree.
seems fair. Because that's what is fair to the American people is for them to know the truth. But in an era when the truth is whatever somebody believes it to be, it does not even have to be substantiated. It can just be I like it, so it's true. And if I don't like it, I'll sue you. That is a
Right.
challenging place to be as a journalist, like with what happened, with what has happened at the Pentagon.
Oh,
Um,
I was talking about that last night, Sharon. As somebody who was a Pentagon correspondent for a little over a year, not very long, and then I went to the Today Show. That is so shocking, and I'm surprised people aren't more outraged about the fact that now Laura Loomer is a Pentagon
yeah,
correspondent, and she agrees that she has to clear all her stories with the Pentagon, communications or public affairs office, that they were being limited in terms of actually walking around the
yeah,
Pentagon. When I covered the Pentagon, there's something called the E-ring, and you just walked around all the time. And that's where you would talk not only to the public affairs officer for the various branches of the military, but that's where you would meet people. You would talk to government, military lawyers, you would talk to
yes,
people, and you would kind of find out what was going on. And that's
yeah.
how you were able to break exclusive stories. And the idea that you couldn't even walk around and I mean, it's just insane what is happening to the media now at the White House. And even the simple fact that President Trump berates these reporters. I interviewed Jonathan Karl, who just wrote a book called Retribution, and they get used to it. But I watch Caitlin Collins, and I really give her props because Trump is just insulting her and insulting her network. And it's just terrible. And the reason why the Pentagon, someone's asking, oh, why isn't it being covered by major networks? Well, that's a really interesting question because I think, again, this shows the sort of reticence that a lot of these network executives have. If they complain too much, they're going to be targeted, and then some of their credentials, they'll even have more repercussions, right? So it's this sort of vicious cycle. But I was saying last night, I asked my friend David Martin, who was a CBS News correspondent at the Pentagon for decades, and a wonderful guy, an incredible reporter. And I said, can you do an interview with me about what the Pentagon has done and these demands they're making of
Mhm,
the journalists?
mhm.
And he said, the Washington bureau chiefs told me to politely decline.
Wow. Wow. And the idea that like freedom of the press is so foundational in the United States. I've seen clips recently from people where they pulled old clips of George W. Bush and they're asking him about freedom of the press. And of course, the press actually was not that nice to George W. Bush when he was in office. There was a lot of people who were like, this guy he's out here smirking and, like he's
Yeah.
not, we can't take him seriously. Like, he actually took a lot of flack as president, which now, his presidency now seems very different in retrospect than perhaps it might have, depending on your viewpoint when you were living through it. But even George W. Bush was like, the freedom of the press is fundamental in the United States. This is like such an important part of who we are. And now we have to get my pillow guy to sign a pledge of like we won't obtain any information that you don't pre-approve. That's the only thing we'll report on. So not only is like the My Pillow Man network, the Mike Lindell network, whatever he's calling it these days, um, not only is that a credentialed press outlet in the Pentagon, they're also saying, "Yes, we'll report whatever you tell us." And
You
that
know,
is a
I
disturbing place to be.
It very much is, and George W. Bush, I covered his presidency, and they got mad at me a couple of times and would only let Matt Lauer interview him for a while
Mm.
because I think they thought I was too aggressive. But, you're right. George W. Bush had a respect for the Constitution.
For the
He
institutions.
had a respect for, yes, as you said, institutions. And I think he didn't like the way he was treated in the press. And by the way, there were some legitimate criticisms of the run up to the Iraq War and the way
Yeah,
they cherry picked information to kind of rationalize the whole weapons of mass destruction. So he deserves some of that critical
sure.
coverage. And
Yeah,
and I think many presidents do. But you're right. I think that people were very tough on him for a lot of different reasons. But listen, that's the fine print when you become president of the United States.
100%. 100%.
But
I
anyway, I
agree.
wanted to make sure everyone knows I'm Katie, as you all probably know. I'm Katie
Mhm.
Couric, and I'm talking to Sharon McMahon. Sharon is known as America's government teacher by many. She has built a huge community online by making sense of complicated issues, inspiring people to take action. But I also think by really helping people understand how our government works
Mm.
and bring back civics to even those of us who may have been taught it at school, but could use a little refresher course
Mhm,
every
mhm,
now and then.
mhm,
So we wanted to talk to you, obviously, Sharon, about last night and about these elections, because this was a big test for Democrats after their punishing 2024 defeat in national elections. And I'm curious what your takeaways was from last night, having watched the returns come in.
mm. Yeah. I mean, I think overall the biggest takeaway is that this is viewed by many people as a referendum on what is happening in the country at large. Did you see this where the Secretary of State of I believe it was Kentucky? Did you see his tweet last night?
I did not. Tell me what
Okay, it
happened.
was I'm paraphrasing, but the gist was that the Secretary of State of Kentucky, they were fielding so many phone calls from people who were like, "I tried to go vote and nobody was there." And he had to issue like a public statement saying, "I know y'all are excited, but Kentucky doesn't have any elections today." They were like, "We are voting." And there was nothing for Kentucky to vote for. So of course, this being sort of an off year for elections, not, only a little more than half the states had elections yesterday. But I just thought that was really indicative of the country, even Kentucky, feeling like, man, we got to make some changes.
Well,
What
that's
is
so
going
interesting,
Yeah.
Sharon, because I'm sure you hear this all the time. My followers, whenever I do a live interview or post something, they're so desperate to take action. So many people say, "What can we do? What can we do?" They feel so helpless
Yeah.
watching all of this unfold. And
Yeah.
I think this was the first opportunity for many people, not those in
Yes.
Kentucky, but
Yeah.
many people in the country to go to the polls to express their, outrage over what's happening
Yeah.
nationally and to basically, I think, in essence, send a message to the White
Mhm.
House.
Yeah, I totally agree that this was the very first litmus test of the direction the country is heading. Do you like the direction we're heading in? And, overwhelmingly, the country sent the message that they do not like the direction we're heading in. I don't believe, when I looked through all of the races, many of them were municipal, there were state level judge races, etc. I don't believe there were any. Um, Contested races that ended up sort of surprisingly flipping red. It was, there were a few races, of course, where it was like a foregone conclusion that a Republican's going to win this seat. But if anything, either Democrats held on to seats they already had, or the seats were flipped blue. So
I
yeah,
was going
go
to
ahead.
ask you, Sharon, was this sort of I haven't had time to really examine every race that happened, and you
Yeah.
probably are focused more on that. And is this universal across the country and across states, even in red states? Was there a big turnout? And because I'd be interested. Obviously, New York City is, and we'll talk about these races. New Jersey, Virginia. relatively blue, kind of purplish, I guess you could
Yeah.
say. And Virginia, which is my home state, is very different depending on where you live.
Yeah.
But what about in some red states? Were there election results there that made you think, oh, wow, even people in red states may be displeased with what is happening nationally? Georgia flipped,
Yeah.
Robin just said.
Yeah, in Georgia and Texas are two examples where Texas picked up another blue seat in a place that, of course, Texas has gone to a lot of lengths to try to solidify Republican supermajorities in the state. So they've undertaken big gerrymandering endeavors there. So there were pockets across the country.
Mississippi, Megan is
Yeah.
saying
Yes.
Mississippi.
Yes.
Women, we'll talk about women in a minute, you guys,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
ladies.
You guys are there. People are saying my small coastal town in North Carolina is like ruled by all women now. So there are some places like, for example, I live in Minnesota where St. Paul, the entire city council of St. Paul, already was women and predominantly women of color. And now St. Paul just elected a female mayor of color as well. So the entire city government of St. Paul, Minnesota, which is a large city, is now women. And we can talk more about that later too, as you said. But there were not any big Republican upsets.
Yeah.
Like there were not any big Republican upsets, which again is sending a relatively clear message that people are unhappy with where things are going. And one of the things I think is interesting too is in New Jersey, where polling had Mikey Sherrill literally sort of like neck and neck with her opponent. Like there was like a 1 point spread between them, and then she ends up beating him relatively easily. That could be a polling error. That's always a possibility, but it could also be a motivation factor that can't be accounted for in the polls. Where
And I
Go
was
ahead.
so glad. I was just going to say she did so well with women
Mm.
voters in New Jersey. And I have to say, as a woman, it was so reassuring and thrilling to see women candidates who have been, I think, subjected to so much sexism in the
Uh-huh.
past to come out on top, to run very strong, no nonsense campaigns.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got Mikey Sherrill, a former Navy pilot, graduated from the Naval Academy, Abigail Spanberger, a CIA case agents, CIA caseworker, I think, and has done other really important government jobs. I forget
yeah,
the other ones. You guys maybe remind me.
yeah,
My work friends here. Um, but that they were able, well, actually it was interesting. Abigail Spanberger ran against a Black woman
yeah.
in Virginia. And so I think maybe that kind of leveled the playing field in terms of subjecting her to a lot of sexism. But Mikey Sherrill, I think, really did face a lot of criticism. And you
Yeah.
wonder about the undercurrent of sexism, even if it's not blatant, if some of the criticisms are fueled by that.
hmm it's obviously so difficult to be a woman in power in the United States, both at a corporate level, but certainly at an elected government level, because it's a nearly impossible row to hoe. You need to be attractive to look good on TV, but not too pretty. Don't try to be hot. Okay. You need to be assertive and in charge, but not bitchy. And that is like that's an it's a standard to which zero men are held. There are a lot of not cute male politicians. Nobody's like, wow, Chuck Grassley got it going on. You know what I mean? He's 90 something years old. Nobody is like, he's just not cute enough for prime time. He's 92 or however old he is, 91 years old. I mean,
Yeah,
he's perfectly normal looking 90-year-old man. But my point is not that Chuck Grassley is unattractive. My point is that nobody expects him to be a certain level of pretty or handsome, but not too handsome. Don't be too assertive, but not too assertive. You know what I mean? Like the standard for women, it's nearly impossible to meet. And we saw this with Hillary when Bill Clinton was running for president, where she's like, "I'm not going to stay home and bake cookies." Like that, "I'm not going to bake cookies" line. The backlash against "I'm not going to stay home and bake cookies," where a woman needs to appear family oriented,
right.
but not too family oriented. Like, how do we navigate this? So it is gratifying to see women be able to thread the needle. It really
Do you,
is.
do you think, I mean, who knows, right? We can only surmise or hope that this is a new chapter in the way female candidates are viewed. I don't know if that's the case, but you certainly would hope so. I mean, I covered Hillary Clinton's campaigns, and, I'll never forget going to the airport and seeing a Hillary Clinton nutcracker and thinking, oh, great, the kind
Mhm.
of stuff and the things at the Republican National Convention and the pins and the T-shirts. It was worse than sexist. It was just grossly misogynistic
Yes,
and
yes,
disgusting, actually.
yes, yes. It was not, they were not even making any effort to hide it. It was
So,
not like a low-level undercurrent. It was overtly misogynistic.
so
Absolutely.
do you think that this does signal a sea change, or I guess we'll have to wait and see, right?
I mean, it's obviously too soon to tell, but I do think that you can even see in the comments on this live that people are saying things like, "I feel an unfamiliar feeling that I haven't encountered in a long time," which is a level of hope that I have not experienced in many months. So, I mean, regardless of whether or not you agree with, Abigail Spanberger's politics or you like Mikey Sherrill's politics, I one of my friends said to me yesterday something that I think is worth mentioning, which is that we have had enough nonsense. It is time for some no nonsense leaders. And I do think that that is one way that both Spanberger and Cheryl were able to be successful is they come across as no nonsense. Let's get stuff done for the people of our state. Let's not spend time arguing about things that make absolutely no difference to the public at large. How about we actually spend money on education? How about we actually get these kids into childcare? Like, the no nonsense, I think, really was part of the appeal of their candidacy at a time when we are full up with nonsense.
We need to talk obviously about the mayoral race in New York City, where I live. It was the largest turnout in over 50 years.
Yeah,
I wonder. I'd love to hear your observations on that race. I'd be happy to share mine, but
yeah,
that was interesting to say the least. And Zohran Mamdani really energized and excited so many people in New York City, really young people. At
yeah,
the same time, there were a lot of people in my neighborhood. I live in the from the Upper East Side, and who are worried about higher taxes and some of his previous statements that he has made about Gaza, the Palestinians, October, feeling that he was not reaching out enough to Jewish New Yorkers,
yes,
the
yes.
largest population outside of Israel of Jews in the world. And I'm curious how you saw that race and what it portends for the Democratic Party, because it seems to me there's always this internal argument within the Democratic Party. Should they appeal to centrists, more independent voters, or should they go all out progressive? And
Mhm,
Bernie, when I interviewed Bernie Sanders, he questioned me. I asked him the same question. He said, well, do you think universal health care is too far left, Katie? And he asked me all these questions, and I basically said, no. And so I think his point was progressive politicians actually are, in many ways, reflecting the views of the electorate. And
mhm.
I don't know where the question is in that, but go ahead and tell me
Yeah.
your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am curious about your take too, but I'll just give you, the view from Minnesota, which is exactly what you're saying. A candidate who really checked so many boxes for young people. He was out at the clubs. He's doing the DJ booth there. Like, I'm sure you saw the videos of him like the night before the election with the DJ and they're playing New York and he's, the Alicia he's sung, and he has the entire house, like, so excited about him, where he really did, the work of appealing to who he knew he could appeal to, which is predominantly young people who are deeply tired of the political status quo. And it doesn't help that Cuomo's last name has the word quo in it, right? Like the
Yeah.
status
Yeah.
quo.
Yeah.
The status
That's a good
quo
point.
is Cuomo. So that's absolutely who he was appealing to, people who want to see a significant change in the country.
I also think this his singular message was so effective about affordability,
Yeah,
about making New York City more appealing to everyone because it is true. I read a piece in the New York Times about young families cannot afford to raise their kids in New York City. They're all leaving the city. And I
yeah,
think income inequality is really resonating. And I think
yeah,
people have had enough of 1% of the country having more wealth than 93% of the
yeah,
country.
yeah. I totally hear that, and one of the sort of tenets of make being able to make important change in politics, is pick one problem to solve. And if you the idea of like everybody needs to fix every problem, that's why people start feeling overwhelmed and like they can never make a difference in their own communities and they can never help their kids' school. There's too many problems to solve. If you pick one problem to solve, it's much easier to make meaningful change on one problem at a time. Know what you're trying to solve for. What is X that I'm trying to solve for? And in an age of where Democrats are throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to figure out what kind of messaging lands, it's clear that in a very diverse city, now I'm not saying that Mamdani can be extrapolated to all cities in America. I don't think he can. But in a very diverse city, he was able to hone in on the one problem. He was able to solve for X in ways that other candidates simply have difficulty figuring out. It doesn't hurt that he's young. It doesn't hurt that he's handsome. It doesn't hurt that he's great on TV. When he's interviewed, man, he has got a good answer for everything you ask him, and that kind of media success definitely helped him. But I have heard from a number of my Jewish friends in New York similar concerns. They're concerned about like, will this give permission to people who are anti-Semitic? Does it create a permission structure for anti-Semitism? He, of course, would say no. He of course would say that's not what I'm trying to do. But I have heard from a number of my Jewish friends that that's one of their concerns is a more anti-Israel, anti-government of Israel stance at a minimum. Yeah.
Right. I think
Mhm.
that is felt among some Jewish New Yorkers, not all, because
Right.
many
Yep.
Jewish New Yorkers also supported
Yep.
Zohran Mamdani. I think, if Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message, right? You mentioned television, but I think what really was so powerful about Mamdani is he understood social media
Yeah.
like no other
100%.
politician I have
Yes.
witnessed before. He utilized it, at every turn. And, it made me think of two important qualities for modern day politicians. Number one, you have to be an incredible communicator.
Yeah.
You have to affect people on a visceral level,
Yeah.
and you have to, I think, um, be inspiring. You
Mhm.
have to be able to make people feel something.
Yeah.
And you have to utilize the current tools that are at your disposal. So when television, I think, was like the third probably most important
Mhm.
model for him or avenue for communicating to
Yeah.
voters. I mean, he was just everywhere on social media. And when you think about the fact that more than 50% of people now get their news and information online or
Yeah.
digitally, I think he really was quite brilliant about how he utilized that, and not only that he utilized it, but the way he did it.
Yeah.
You were talking about the DJ, or you talking about walking from the tip of Manhattan to the bottom of Manhattan.
Mhm.
So he really, I think, was very clever. Before we go, and I know we're going to be talking to John Ellis, my friend, who's like the numbers cruncher for polling.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about redistricting because Prop 50 was voted pretty overwhelmingly, my
Yeah.
understanding is, in
Yeah.
California, which
Mhm.
basically all the people watching this are very, I think, know what's going on politically. But just in case, Texas obviously is redistricting, doing mid-decade redistricting, which is highly, highly unusual at the urging of Donald Trump. So Gavin Newsom said, "Screw them. I'm going to do it myself, but I have to have it go through a vote." So now they'll be able to redistrict to make up for some of the seats that were gained in Texas and in the Republican column. Obviously, this is an effort by Donald Trump to maintain control of the House so he can continue to do all the things he's doing without any kind of bulwark against his goals. So meanwhile, so California is now going to do it. But, there's a lot of this jockeying going on,
Yeah.
Sharon. As you know,
Yeah.
Ohio is just finished. So they now have more Republican seats. Missouri's redrawing in favor of Republicans. I think North Carolina will have a +1 for the GOP. Indiana, Florida may be next. Meanwhile, Wes
Mm.
Moore, the governor of Maryland, announced that they're looking into redistricting.
Yep.
Virginia, I think the New York Constitution, Kathy Hochul told me, prevents New York State from doing it until I think I think maybe 2028, so too late for the midterms. Anyway, I wanted to ask you, because I've been talking to people about this, and many smart people I know, Sharon, are saying it is going to be a net gain for the Republicans.
Mhm.
And
It's true.
that is really upsetting to me.
Mm.
I just have to be honest here because this seems, first of all, wrong. It seems like a bad way to run a country.
Mhm.
And so how do Democrats deal with that? And do you think it will prevent them from doing what the party out of power usually does in a midterm, which is win back the House?
Mm. I do agree. I totally agree with your assessment that it is still going to be a net plus for Republicans overall. There just simply are not enough Democratic states willing to participate and that have the infrastructure to allow them to participate. Like you're saying with New York, they've developed. Many democratically run states have developed really the best practice of creating districts, which is a citizen advisory board or a commission that determines these things rather than partisan gerrymandering.
Well,
That's the
there was a bill that was introduced on Capitol Hill that
Mhm.
suggested a nonpartisan commission
Yeah.
oversee this, and
Yes.
no Republican voted for it.
Right. I think that's that, and all political scientists that I've spoken to about this, people who study gerrymandering full time, have said this is the gold standard. Is this citizen redistricting or a commission of some kind? Um, that said, I understand California's position, which is if you aren't going to play by the rules, why should we be bound to the rules as well? If you're going to tie our hands behind our back, why should we go along with that? So I do understand where California is coming from because they're looking at the big picture nationally. It's not that California already doesn't have a Democratic majority, it's that they're trying to counter some of what's happening on a national scale. But I do think the solution to this has to be congressional action. And otherwise, we have now, you can call it Pandora's box. We can talk about it as a domino effect. This is going to keep happening after every single, because we elect the House every other year. So this is now going to become the pattern that we're going to engage in partisan redistricting to collapse power into the hands of people who do not necessarily hold the majority. And that can be true with both Democrats and Republicans. That we are going to ensure that Americans feel less and less and less represented by the two-party system. And if we want to fix that, I really do think it is imperative that Congress take action because otherwise this is going to be the new norm.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. There's so many more things I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about the Supreme Court and
Yeah.
tariffs.
Tariffs.
I guess the Supreme Court is deciding, and that will be, a big problem for Donald Trump if they
Yeah.
say he does not have the power,
Yeah.
right, to put
Mhm.
these tariffs in play.
Mhm.
How do you think they're going to vote? Or
It does not, the hearing today did not seem to tip in Trump's favor. This current court is very skeptical of presidential overreach when it comes to executive action.
I feel
That's
like
not
they haven't been skeptical enough, though, Sharon.
They have not been particularly skeptical of a lot of Trump's actions. That's absolutely true. But they are essentially answering the same question that they were answering when Joe Biden tried to forgive student loans and they told him no. He was trying to locate his authority to forgive student loans in a specific law, the HEROES Act. And they said the HEROES Act doesn't say go ahead and do broad, sweeping student loan forgiveness. You are overstepping your authority here. And this is almost the exact same question, just using a different law where Donald Trump says he is locating the authority to enact these broad-based tariffs. I think they appeared quite skeptical that this law right here specifically says, yeah, go ahead and enact widespread tariffs. I've spoken to Amy Coney Barrett recently, and she is very much of the opinion that the law better say those words. That is her viewpoint. Like, she doesn't even, by and large, you can just like her, dislike her, agree with her viewpoints, not agree with her viewpoints. She believes that we need to go by what the text of the law is and not even necessarily the legislative intent. Not trying to divine what the legislative intent was. Like, we are going to go by what you actually wrote down on paper. And if you did not write down on paper, and by the way, the president can go ahead and do all the tariffs they want just with a stroke of a pen. If it's not in the law, I don't think they're going to go for it. That was how the questioning appeared to me today. Of course, I'm not, I can't prognosticate, but I do think it's probably not going to end well for Trump on
Well,
tariffs.
everybody's watching this very carefully. I think my friend Neil Katyal is arguing
Yeah,
in front of the Supreme Court. I wish
yeah,
he would talk to me,
he's
but I
great.
don't. I don't think he's allowed to. But
I know.
anyway, Sharon, will you come and talk to me again?
I would love to.
I love talking to you.
Yeah,
I love actually having you break down all these constitutional issues. I really wanted to talk to you about the ICE raids because I'm really upset about what's
yeah,
happening there. But we can do
yeah.
it hopefully another time because I don't know. It just seems like this is just so wrong that these masked guys are
I know.
pulling people out of cars. I saw on the LA Times feed today that they arrested some man and he had a like 2 or 3 year old child in the back
Yeah.
seat and a car seat. And the ICE agents got in the car and drove away s- and they
Where did
had
that child go?
where did the child go? They took the father away in handcuffs or, basically took him away to some detention center. And then they're just driving a car with this little girl in a car
Yeah,
seat in the back
yeah.
seat. It is
That's not
so,
okay. That's
it is
not
so
normal, and
sad.
it's not okay. No. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Katie. I was just like, I'm
No,
indignant about it. It's not okay. It's not normal. It's not how the United States has ever conducted itself. How dare we think that we are some city on a hill for democracy when we are allowing masked, unidentified men to roam the streets of the country and to ostensibly kidnap people into unmarked cars? And yes, I do understand that some of these people are wanted for crimes. I understand that some of these people are in the country illegally. Both of those things can be true. And we have a process that should be followed to make sure that somebody understands I'm not being kidnapped right now. You can want every single immigration law in this country forced to the highest level, and it still should not involve masked, unidentified men kidnapping you off the street and taking your child to an unknown location. That I did not stand in front of a high school classroom for more than a decade and pledge allegiance to a flag that said with liberty and justice for all, to have masked men in unmarked cars who do not identify themselves kidnapping people off the street. That is not how America is supposed to work.
it's really upsetting. And they say, Kristi Noem said, oh, no U.S. citizens have been
No,
arrested. And
that's
I think
false.
even Brett Kavanaugh today said, I know we got to go. No U.S. or if they have been detained, they're immediately let go. And that's just not true.
That's simply false.
170, according to ProPublica, 170 U.S. citizens have been arrested and detained, some for several days.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where they're getting their information, but and not only that, it's just like the lack of due process is
Yeah.
just horrifying.
100%.
Anyway, Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to
My
go
pleasure.
talk to John Ellis now. Really
Have fun.
great to be with you.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can do this again
I'll see
soon.
you again soon, Katie. Thanks,
Okay. Thanks,
everyone. Thanks
Sharon.
for being here. Bye.
Thank you. All right, everyone, stand by because my friend John Ellis, who is an election watcher extraordinaire, is going to join us now. He, huh?
Hi. Courtney's saying we might have to come back. I think he's having some trouble.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
he might be having trouble with Substack. As we're waiting, I just wanted to tell you guys, have we got a deal for you until Christmas? Is this right?
No, and through Saturday.
Oh, through Saturday, not till Christmas. Sorry. Through Saturday, an annual subscription is how much? 20% off?
Yes.
20% off. If you guys are like what we're doing here, want to support our work, it's $7 a month. Is that right, you guys?
Yeah.
To subscribe, to be a paid subscriber. You can get exclusive interviews at times. And there he is, John Ellis. I can't believe it. As I live and breathe.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for doing this. I know that you're not, you're kind of a newbie to Substack, aren't you?
No, I actually was one of the first on
Well, you're
Substack.
one of the first print guys. And by the way, I just want to make sure that everyone knows about, I mean, John has a terrific newsletter called News Items, one of the best newsletters out there. Where are you going there, John?
I'm
Here.
trying to I'm trying to set up. I'm set up on the whatever it is, this desktop here.
Oh,
It says 541 Substack Live Katie interview with John Ellis. So I thought I was in the right place, but
yeah, you are in the right place. And the way you are right now is perfect. But anyway,
that's good.
John has a newsletter called News Items. It's what all these corporate leaders read. John works really hard on it, has the most interesting stories. I have to say, it's not for dummies. You have to be kind of intellectually curious to read John's newsletter. And John, what's the best way for people to subscribe?
Just to go to news-items.com and it's all there.
Anyway, it's really terrific and it's something I love to read on a regular basis when and sometimes and most of the time I understand what John is writing about. Occasionally I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? But anyway, John, we're here to talk about the election. Can you explain to everyone your background and why you're uniquely qualified to talk about the election results?
I'm not sure that I'm uniquely qualified,
Well,
but I work.
you're among a number of people who are uniquely qualified. How's that?
Okay, thanks. I worked at the NBC News election unit for about 10 years. And then I was a columnist, a political columnist for the Boston Globe. My family has been involved in politics for a long time. My uncle is George Herbert Walker Bush, and my first cousin is George W. Bush. So I have that perspective on politics. And then I've been in and around it really my entire adult life. So
And you had a key role on the Fox election news desk, right?
yeah, I was the head of the decision desk from 1998 through 2000, and then my protege, if you will, Ron in Michigan, took over. He's still there. So
Well, I think you still also have a lot of access to polling data, right, John?
yes, we read a lot of polls. I have another newsletter called Political News Items, which is largely devoted to public opinion and what's going on in the electorate, various segments of the electorate. So.
Well, let's talk about let's pick that big brain of yours and talk about last night. I know that you called it a blowout with Democrats racking up win after win. Were you surprised at the results, John?
I wasn't surprised that the Democrats won the four big races. I mean, Mondani obviously was going to win in New York, and he wasn't running against a Republican. I mean, Curtis Sliwa was the Republican nominee, but he was a non-factor. But
Although
I thought.
he took a lot of votes away from Andrew Cuomo, I think, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there are very few people in New York who just vote Republican just to sort of send whatever message they think they're sending. But the big three races, New Jersey, Virginia, and California, I thought the Democrats would win all three. I did not expect them to win by the margins that they did, and what's her name? Cheryl, Mikey
Mikey
Cheryl.
Sherrill.
I thought would win by 5. She won by 13. I thought Spanberger would win by 8. She won by 17. And I thought that the Prop 50 referendum would pass. but I thought it would get 55 or 58, and it ended up, so far anyway, 2-1. More impressive to me actually was down ballot. There was a recall vote. It's a standard thing in Pennsylvania for Supreme Court justices. And I thought that would be close. And I thought, the Republicans poured vast sums of money into it. And all three Democratic Supreme Court justices were returned with over 60% of the vote, each one. And then in Georgia, which I hadn't really paid much attention to, but the utility board uh, election was there. That's a statewide election, and there were two big upsets, Democrat beating Republicans. So across the board, when you look at elections and you say it was a landslide this way or that, well, landslide means that it happens all the way down the ballot. This one happened all the way down the ballot. So it was very good news for the Democrats and not such good news for the Republicans.
Do you think it was, as many people believe, a referendum on Donald Trump and the Trump administration?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think I think the electorate uh, has a view of Trump, which is that some of what he's doing is good and needs to be done, but the way he's going about it is the wrong way to do it. And I think there's also just fierce opposition to Trump. That's 50% of the country. So if you add 5 or 6 points, you're going to win.
The turnout in New York in the mayoral race was bigger than it has been in 50 years.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Sharon McMahon before you and I started talking, and we were talking about what this signals for the Democratic Party. I talked to a couple of people last night, John, and they were saying, or I was watching even Jen Psaki saying this on MSNBC, that the Democrats don't have to be that specific or that prescriptive about where they need to be on the spectrum of centrist versus progressive, that they need to be who they are for that particular constituency. And I'm curious if you took anything from what happened with Democrats last night and thought, this is the answer to the Democrats' problems.
Well, I think the energy is on the left, and I think Mandani is one way to look at the election. That the energy, juicing the turnout and doing as well as he did, given who he is. So you have that one part of that's what the Democrats need to do more with that. And then you have other people saying, no, the centrist one in New Jersey, the centrist one in Virginia, that's what we should do. And that hasn't, that's going to continue to play out, which way centrist or more progressive or whatever the word is. I don't think that's resolved on the Democratic side. They're just enjoying the fact that they finally won an election.
Well, doesn't that depend on where you are and who your constituents are? I mean, New York City, as you said, is a very unique place. Not a lot of Republican voters in New York City. And I guess the point that Liz Smith, you must know Liz she was working with Pete
Yeah.
Buttigieg and
Mhm.
and Jen were basically saying, listen to the voters you're representing,
Yeah.
and address the issues that they care about instead of kind of having a one size fits all for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously necessary if you're going to run for mayor of New York. You're not going to be a conservative, obviously. But I think that and in national terms, I don't think Mandani helps the Democratic Party. And I think the Trump White House will do everything they can to make him sort of the avatar of the Democratic Party. So it's tricky waters they have to navigate. But what unites them is their unhappiness, their dislike of Donald Trump, and that covers up a lot of internal disagreement.
And it was more than their just distaste for Donald Trump, I think, that motivated a lot of New Yorkers, particularly young New Yorkers, Sharon and I were saying it was kind of a disgust and a feeling of being just totally fed up with the status quo.
Yes.
And, basically feeling like the people in power are too old. They really haven't helped us. Income inequality has only increased under their leadership. They're not getting anything done. This generation is going to do less well than their parents' generation. They can't find jobs. Housing is too expensive. I mean, there's a whole litany of complaints about baby boomers, of which we are in that category. And
Not
people are really
us.
pissed, honestly, about the country baby boomers are leaving to a younger generation. So I think, maybe progressives, are going to gain in popularity because they just don't feel like it's working.
Yeah, I mean, I have a somewhat counter view of things, which is I think the next turn in, post MAGA is going to be much more left than people think. And, you make the good point, which is, the geezer factor is a huge issue. Like, when will these people get out of the way? That really worked to Mondani's advantage. And then the second thing is, I was in New York on election day having lunch with friends. We always have this election day lunch, and I stopped before to get a cup of coffee. And as I was looking across the counter at this young woman, it occurred to me that the most amount of money she could make in that job, absolute maximum, would be like $45,000. And when I thought about trying to live in New York City on $45,000, I can't imagine how you do that. And then I think, you look at all those people behind the counter at all those coffee shops and all those delis and so on and so forth. And the affordability issue isn't an issue; it's the issue. And Mondani did a good job of capitalizing on that.
Yeah, and I think like his singular focus, and I interviewed him last week, and I asked him for advice for other Democrats, and I mean it sounds kind of cliched, but he said, listen and spend more time listening to people than telling them what they should think, and I think that actually is a smart point. I wanted to ask you about something that you noted. You talked about Democrats faring far better with voters of color than they did in last year's presidential election when Trump won close to half of Latino voters and roughly doubled his support among Black voters to 15%. I'm curious what you think the root cause of some of these voters saying we're going to go back to back to our tendencies and we're going to support Democratic candidates. Do you think it's the ICE raids? Do you think it's like now they're saying it's fine to racially profile people and to arrest them? The fact that a lot of U.S. citizens, despite what Kristi Noem says, are being arrested and detained. I mean, what do you think is happening that that people of color, voters of color, have become disillusioned, perhaps, with the Republican Party, or less enamored, at least?
Well, I mean, I think the racial edge of the Trump administration is pronounced, right? I mean, they aren't really making any bones about it. And if you're a Black American, they're basically pushing you away. I think the ICE raids are sort of a metaphor for a disregard for the Hispanic community. And if you treat people badly, they're going to go the other way. And I think those two groups feel fairly strongly that they've been treated badly by the Trump administration, and I think sort of betrayed, because Trump did make a major outreach effort in the 2024 campaign, and then it wasn't it was a completely different kettle of fish when they took office.
And then turning DEI into a four-letter acronym, and demonizing it so significantly, I'm sure was disappointing for a lot of Black voters too.
I mean, I don't know. I just don't know the answer to that. But I think that the sort of symbolic moves that were made, the reintroduction of Confederate soldier statues, and the firing of the black guy who was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I mean, just
The
one
head
after
of the
another.
Library of Congress, John,
Yeah.
almost immediately got fired,
Yeah.
right?
It just seemed like, and I think it seemed that way because it was that way, that a lot of people, a lot of black people in positions of authority found themselves out on the street once the Trump administration took office. And, if you push people away, they'll probably go the other way.
John, since you have access to exit polls and kind of are able to gauge the mood of the country, did anything stand out to you in particular when you looked at some of the exit poll results around the country?
I've been hammering away at the fact that Trump's approval rating is very low and has been for some time, and so I was heartened to see that I was correct about that. His approval rating, in state after state, with the states that they polled, was dreadful. And I think that one of the weird things about the narrative is that sort of the media narrative that's going on is that Trump is sort of all powerful and is this enormous movement and this, that, and the other thing. But
Unstoppable.
unstoppable, etc. I mean, it's like you would think that King Kong had arrived, but the fact is, out there in the electorate, his approval rating is 40% plus or minus, and his disapproval rating is in the mid 50s, if not higher. So it's a weird disconnect. He is enormously popular, obviously, with his base and the Republican Party generally. His favorable ratings there are 85-90%. But he's obviously enormously unpopular among Democrats. So the key group is independents, and they're 2-1, unfavorably disposed to Mr. Trump. So this supposed political monolith is standing on uneven ground. Let's put it that way.
You know what I can't figure out, John, and maybe I don't know if you can either, but this sort of in your face tone deafness of Donald Trump himself as a person, whether he is posting a meme of himself as a fighter pilot, having basically, poop all over the protesters, and or whether he's having a Great Gatsby, Halloween party at Mar-a-Lago and letting cameras broadcast it all over the country on the same weekend that SNAP benefits are stopping for 42 million Americans. At some point, this cognitive dissonance that he exhibits, which I find so grotesque and offensive, honestly. I mean, I could name all sorts of examples. I mean, I haven't even mentioned the East Wing demolition and $350 million for a ballroom bought by corporate people like the head of Comcast. Way to
Right.
go. At some point, I always am like, doesn't this bother people? And do you think that's starting to resonate with people, that they're saying, this guy is such a callous asshole, I cannot support him?
I think it already has. That's sort of when I write about it for political items, I've been hammering on the fact that Trump is wildly unpopular, relatively speaking. So I don't think it's like a I don't think that the Gatsby dinner at Mar-a-Lago is sort of a tipping point, and now people will realize, something about Trump that they didn't know before. I think people know Trump very well, and guess what? His unfavorable rating is very high by any measure. I mean, against Obama or Clinton or Reagan or H.W. Bush or W. Bush. It's at this stage of his presidency, he's lower rated, if you will, than anybody before him.
I hear what you're saying, where they know who he is and know kind of his character, but honestly, every day, John, it feels like there is no bottom, and especially given the current circumstances, where a little bit of, not even empathy, because I don't think he's capable of that, but a little bit of understanding or knowledge, or even being politically savvy enough to know that you don't like it. get in people's faces when so many are suffering, even with the government shutdown and all these federal workers who find themselves going to food banks. I mean, it's just so tone deaf and such an inability to read the room, if you will, that I think maybe that it's like a drip, drip, drip. And at some point, people are like, okay, enough. But that's just sort of the sense that I get. I wanted to ask you about the government shutdown. And do you think, Trump went into spin mode? He posted on social media that Republicans lost because he wasn't on the ballot. Of course. And because of the ongoing government shutdown, he also renewed his calls to get rid of mail in voting and even eliminate the filibuster so Senate Republicans could end the shutdown. What did you make of his reaction to last night's really devastating losses for Republicans?
Well, one thing that he said that is true is that when he is on the ballot, more Republicans vote, right? And when he's not on the ballot, fewer do, and that was part of the reason the Democrats racked up such large gains last night. The rest of it, my favorite part was was he said that the vote in California, remembering that it was 2-1 in favor of the Prop 50, was quote rigged end quote, and that the whole thing was basically a scam quote unquote, which as Trump craziness goes, that was right up there. I do think the results
Well,
of
that's his answer always when something is not
yeah, yeah.
going his way, that it's a scam, it was rigged. I mean, whether it was the 2020 election, I mean, anytime he doesn't like the results, he says it was rigged.
Right, right. But it seemed to he put it out before actually the races had been called, so it was especially I thought good. But the on the shutdown, I think the results from last night will make it much more likely that the shutdown comes to an end probably by the weekend. Republican politicians, not Trump, but members of Congress, governors got to look at these results and say, this is not going to work for us. And, they have to calibrate accordingly. And I think they will. And one big push, the big move that they can make is to end the government shutdown.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, do you think this will allow Republicans to grow a pair when they see, like, there might be, don't you? I love Substack because I just say whatever I want to say and I don't have to be careful. But, do you think they're going to say, like, oh, God, I'm going to get screwed if I keep supporting this guy? Suddenly it's my own hide that is at risk if I don't, maybe uh, set up some guardrails or stop Donald Trump, who, as you point out, is increasingly unpopular. Do you think it's gonna fuel them to say, "Hey, maybe I don't have to pledge total fealty to this guy"?
So they're in a bind, right? Because they want to keep their jobs, and they know that if Trump gets them a primary opponent and endorses that primary opponent, they might lose. In certain states they almost certainly will lose, and so they're terrified of getting on Trump's wrong side because Trump, can come in and get them a primary opponent and make their lives miserable. So there's sort of self-preservation. The other piece of self-preservation is that the election results from yesterday would indicate that going along with Trump at every turn is going to cost you at the polls. So they're between a rock and a hard place. We'll see. I mean, the most interesting thing to me this morning was there was a story on Axios in which I think Stephen Miller, but somebody in the White House who said, if any Republican, tries to get distance from the White House, we will call them at 3 o'clock in the morning. We will make their lives. I mean, these are actual quotes. We will make their lives a living hell. On and on and on. And so clearly, the White House anticipates that Republicans, particularly Republicans up for reelection in purplish districts or states, will want to try to get some distance between themselves and the White House. And this was sort of a preemptive strike to say, if you do that, we're going to make your life a living misery. And
Do you think that'll work? Do you think that'll make them cower? Or do you think they'll say, hey, we're going to take the chance because our constituents don't really like you, President Trump.
Well, it is.
It depends, I guess, on the state and on the race, right?
Well, it's key. Obviously, it's not. It doesn't matter, right? If in Alabama or Montana, the Republican is going to win, regardless of, it could be a tornado. The Republican's still going to win. But in the purplish states, the states that aren't, hard red or hard blue, it's a real problem for Republican office holders, because if they get uh, identified, or if they are seen as, slavishly Trump, they're going to pay a price in the midterm election. So it's a tricky wicket for them. And my guess is that they won't do anything until their primaries have passed.
Interesting. And what do you think this election will have any? I know Trump blamed the government shutdown. I have two questions about that. You've seen polling. My understanding is most Americans believe Republicans are responsible, or more Americans believe Republicans are responsible for the shutdown. And do you think these election results will move the needle either way for the shutdown to come to an end?
Oh, I think the election results will bring the shutdown to an end. I mean, I
What do you
think
mean? The Republicans are going to buckle, you think?
I think that Thune and Johnson will be sufficiently unnerved by what's happened to say to the White House, "Look, we got to give some ground. We got to get this thing off the table, because if it continues, we might see more of what happened last night." So the question is whether Trump cares what they think. And you and I both know a certain correspondent who covers Mr. Trump, and her view is that Trump doesn't care. So we'll see.
Who's that correspondent?
Her name is her first name is Maggie.
Oh, Maggie Haberman, you're
No,
talking.
no, well, we're just talking on for news. So
Yes, Entrepreneur and 3,700 other people. Wait, I'm trying to respond to questions that you all have in this chat, because, as I said, John has a big fat brain and he's here for us to pick it. What do you think is going to happen with the tariffs in the Supreme Court? It's all indications, according to Sharon, was that they don't think that Donald Trump necessarily is empowered to put these tariffs in place.
I mean, I think the law is fairly clear that he does not have that power. The administration is putting out the word, which, strikes me that they know that the court is not going to rule in their favor. So they've been just recently started to tell the story that, yeah, if we lose in the Supreme Court, we have all these workarounds that, will keep the tariff program, if you will, functioning. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But it does. They wouldn't be saying that. They wouldn't be putting that line out there in the press unless they thought the court was going to rule against them. It seems to me.
Well, what about these workarounds and the fact that the White House, I've been asking about this. I mean, they haven't outright ignored any judicial rulings yet, but they don't seem to be that fazed by them, do they, John?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that they have been minimally cooperative with, all sorts of rulings, and we don't know. I mean, it gets down when the workarounds. It gets down into the weeds of this clause and that clause, and maybe they'll get away with it if the Republicans in Congress don't raise a fuss about it. Maybe they can get away with it, but it seems to me, the fact of the matter is the tariffs are illegal, and so at some point the rule of law stands or it does not.
And finally, I'm obsessed with all this redistricting stuff. You mentioned Prop 50. And I was talking again to Sharon about this. And if you add up the numbers and you look at the states that are redistricting in favor of the GOP versus those that are redistricting in favor of the Democrats, the Republicans look like they're going to come out ahead. and gain more seats than the Democrats, making their chances of retaining control of the House better, right? I mean, listen, this is your area of expertise. What do you think is going to happen, and do you think that this redistricting effort is going to net out in favor of Republicans? And what do you think the impact of that will be on the midterms?
I don't know if it all ends. I mean, I presume that people who cover this very closely are correct in saying that the Republicans will quote gain end quote 5 to 9 seats. But I'm not sure that's true. I mean, there's it's not just a matter of drawing a district so it's 80% Republican, right? And I'm not sure that they're they will be able to achieve what they say they're going to achieve using all of this redistricting, and in mid course. I mean, this should be taking place in 2031, not today, which is traditionally how it works every 10
Right.
years.
After the
So
census, right?
yeah, it's a census, and then you redraw the lines accordingly. New York loses two congressional seats, Florida picks up three. I mean, that's the way it normally works. They forced this thing, miraculously, in my view, to be able to redraw districts now. But I don't know if it's too clever by half.
We'll see. It it's concerning, I think, because the people who claim things are rigged are the ones who are actually doing the rigging. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean the good old days of the first time I covered redistricting was in 1981, I think it was, and there was a congressman named Phil Burton and his brother John, and they redistricted California. Somebody described the districts as a Picasso painting, and they added, I think, 5 or 7 seats. I mean, it was just remarkable. And then the next thing that happened was software came in, and so you could do just incredible, precise drawing of lines because you had all of the data, and the data could be, put on a spreadsheet and worked out exactly. And now that's sort of supercharged by AI. Um, I don't know how that will all come out in the wash. We'll have to see.
Yeah, to be continued. Well, before we go, anything else on your mind?
No, I'm writing a piece now about mandates, and one of the things that I thought happened with Joe Biden in 2020 was he came in and he thought he was, the New Deal 2.0, when he was really elected just to get rid of Trump, and that led him to all sorts of problems. This president, Trump, was elected with barely 50% of the vote, and he's acted like has received 75% of the vote. And so I think he's just going to, hit the rocks because he doesn't have the mandate that he imagines he has. And I'm thinking about I watched Mamdani's speech last night, and he got 50.4% of the vote, and he sounded like somebody who had gotten 60% of the vote. And so I think in his case, he's riding a wave of goodwill, but it's going to have to be very careful because 49.6% of New York City didn't vote for him.
It's interesting. It feels like the term mandate has been thrown around so much and kind of, I think, distorted by politicians to kind of wish certain things were so, and that they should be much more cautious
Yeah.
about claiming that. And it would probably help them with voters too, right?
Yeah. I mean, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, overwhelming, right? 57-41 or whatever it was, 58-41. That's a huge win, but not just that. The Democrats won down ballot as well. They picked up 10 seats in the General Assembly. And so she could go out and say, "I have a huge mandate, right? I can do what I think, whatever I want." And I guarantee you, that's not what she will do. She'll build slowly, and that I think is, that when I look at Mamdani, when I look at Trump, when I look at Biden, they all thought that 50% plus one was a mandate. It isn't, and it gets you into trouble if you think it is.
Hey, before we go, I want to mention something that I think is interesting. Maybe you could write about it. There's something called the States Project, because you mentioned state legislatures where people are getting more involved at the state level to turn legislatures
Mhm.
uh, mostly blue. And because that's where so many laws are being enacted, if you're talking about reproductive rights or gun laws or all kinds of, climate change legislation, and it's less expensive than obviously federal elections, and you really can have an impact and change the composition of state legislatures, and that is a very effective way promoting some of the policies that you may believe in. Have you heard about the States Project? I just learned about this recently.
Yeah, I have. The untold story of the 2020 election where Biden beat Trump is that the Republican version of the States Project was the most successful political operation in recent memory. I mean, they just swept through a state legislature after state legislature. They've been working on it for 10 years. And now you have redistricting in Texas in part because of it. You have redistricting in Missouri in part because of that Republican state project. And that's where people can, people who can't really, you and I can't really make a big difference in national politics, but you can have a huge influence at the local level, and that, as we see with redistricting, has real implications at the national level. So, yeah, I think it's something the Democrats fell way behind on. The Republicans really did a fantastic job of it in 2020. It was the untold story of the 2020 election, and Democrats are now catching up to it.
I think it's interesting because when people say, "What can we do?" this is something that is much more, pragmatic. They can have an impact. They can do these giving circles. I think I'm going to have the head of the States Project on my podcast and talk about it, because I think a lot of people don't know that this is one way to really have an impact on policy measures that are being enacted state by state by state, all over the country.
Yeah, no, it absolutely. I mean, if you have control of the state legislature in XYZ state, particularly if it's a purple state, you're going to have a major impact in national politics.
Well, John, thank you for doing this. Thank you for everybody watching. I think people really appreciate your expertise, John. I know that I do. And again, John has a terrific newsletter called News Items and Political News Items. If you really want to, blow your brains out. I'm kidding. If you really want, if you really want to know the ins and outs of what's happening politically, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, John. Thank you so much for doing this. And we had a big audience of almost 4,000 people watching.
Wow, we did. I did with my podcast partner Joe Klein, and I did a live. We actually did it on Riverside, and I think we had like 22 people watch.
well, well, you and me, baby. Let's do this more
So
often.
this is great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. And everyone, thanks for watching. And please subscribe, as I said, to John's Substack, but also because you write on Substack, you don't just do your newsletters, right, John?
I do. I do the Substack newsletter. News items. I do every morning, 6 days a week, and then I
Wait,
write.
that's only for paid subscribers, though, right?
No, well, you right at the moment we're doing a test with Bloomberg, and so it's free for the month of November. Right? The whole
There
thing
you
is free.
go.
but then it goes back to the onerous $150 a year. So yeah, and then I write quote columns in the way that I did for the Boston Globe back when, usually on political news items, but sometimes on news items as well.
Well, you're doing a great job. I know you work really hard. You get up at a god awful early hour every morning to do this, right?
I've gotten used to it. Yeah, I get up at 1 and I work until 6:30. I get the newsletter out, and then I go back to sleep for 2 hours, and then my day begins. So
That sounds miserable, John, but thank you for doing it.
I've
I
gotten
think
used
you're
I've gotten
insane.
used to it. I actually quite like working. I've been doing it a long time, but I've gotten to like working between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. It's perfect. There are no distractions. You get an enormous amount of work done in a very short period of time. So
Okay, well, I'm not going to follow your lead on that, but thanks for sharing. Anyway, great to see you. Give my love to Susan. Thank you all for watching, and please let me know who you wanted me to talk to if you appreciated this conversation, and just let me know what's on your mind. And subscribe and be a paid subscriber if you would. I was feeling so embarrassed doing this, but
I'm a paid subscriber.
okay. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
It's the discount
Oh, and discount. We're having a discount till Friday, 20%.
through Saturday.
Through Saturday. Sorry, I don't get these things right. Through Saturday, 20% off the annual subscription fee.
Great.
All right, I'm going to go make dinner.
Thanks. All right,
Okay.
I'm going to go
Bye,
eat
John.
dinner.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.